full speed toward the sound he wasn't supposed to remember. No command, no hesitation. Just 2 short whistle blows, and suddenly, the dog everyone said was broken wasn't. That's how this story begins. Not with a forgotten war dog standing frozen in a shelter yard, staring at a man his body knew, even if his mind didn't. They said he was too far gone, that the trauma had wiped everything. But when the whistle sounded, he sat exactly like he used to. Back straight, chest proud, eyes burning through time. He remembered. Not all at once, not everything, but enough to come home. This is the story of a dog trained to forget, and the man who never did. If that moment hit you, stay, like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from, because we promise what's coming next will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. The late September wind carried the kind of chill that whispered change. Leaves skated across cracked sidewalks as Darius Cole turned off the engine of his truck and stared at the modest building in front of him. Hope Street Animal Rescue was painted in faded red letters above the entrance, half of them chipped away like promises never kept. The name was ironic. Darius hadn't believed in hope for a long time. Not since the sandstorms of Kandahar. Not since the mission that took most of his unit, and the sound of gunfire still carved its way into his dreams. But today he was here, not for therapy, not for closure, but because his sister wouldn't stop calling. "Just go look," she had said last week over the phone. "You're not doing well, Dee. I can hear it in your voice. Maybe having a dog again. Maybe it brings something back." Darius had nearly hung up, but something about her voice, pleading soft, the way she'd used to sound when they'd buried their mom, cut through the fog in his chest. So now, here he was. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside, its cheerful chime at odds with the sterile scent of bleach and stale kibble. A young woman with pink hair and a clipboard looked up from behind the counter. "Welcome. You here to adopt?" she asked, voice bright, rehearsed. Darius nodded once, just looking. The woman smiled politely and gestured to a hallway on the right. "Take your time, the larger dogs are in the back." He walked through narrow aisles of cages. Dogs barked, whined, some wagged tails with desperate hope. Others just watched him with wary, tired eyes. He moved slowly, mechanically, like patrolling a sector. Left, right, assess, move. His boots echoed off the linoleum. None of these dogs were him. None of them were Tyson. And he shouldn't even be looking for Tyson. That dog was gone, officially reassigned after the injury, then discharged, then lost in the bureaucracy. Darius had tried tracking him once, but the paper trail dissolved in a maze of signatures and shredded files. Still, he dreamed of him. The deep bark in the night, the steady presence curled against the bunker wall, eyes always watching. Just as he turned to leave, a voice called behind him, "Sir, we've got one more in the back enclosure. He's the special." The handler led him to a gate marked "Behavioral Rehab Only, Staff Access." Inside, a single German Shepherd lay curled in the far corner. Black and tan, broad chest, left ear half torn. The moment Darius saw him, everything in his chest collapsed inward. "Tyson," he breathed. The dog stirred, lifted his head slightly. Brown eyes met his. "That's what he came in with," the handler said. "No tag, no chip, just a piece of torn fabric with the name stitched in." She glanced at Darius. "You know him?" Darius nodded slowly, unable to form the words. He stepped closer to the chain-link fence, his heart a ticking bomb. "It's me," he whispered. "Tyler." Darius didn't move. Couldn't. The breath caught in his lungs felt like concrete. He remembered every scar on that dog's body. He'd been there for each one. The time Tyson dragged him from shrapnel. The time they were pinned for 17 hours in a collapsing building. Tyson licking blood from his hand to keep him conscious. And now, nothing. No flicker of recognition. "He doesn't react to anyone," the handler explained quietly. "Doesn't bark, doesn't bite, but he doesn't trust either. Most days he doesn't eat unless no one's watching." Darius took a slow step back, eyes never leaving the dog. "I want to take him," the handler hesitated. "He's not cleared for adoption. We're considering other options." A chill went through Darius, not from the air but the implication. "Let me sign a waiver, whatever you need, he's coming with me." The woman searched his face, perhaps recognizing the weight he carried, the gravity in his voice. She nodded. "Wait here." The ride home was silent. Tyson lay in the back seat, unmoving, eyes fixed on the window like he didn't recognize the world or didn't care to. Darius kept glancing in the mirror, waiting for something. Anything, a twitch, a sigh, a tail thump. Nothing. When they got home, Darius opened the passenger door and stood back. "Come on, Ty." The dog hesitated, then stepped out, slow, deliberate, sniffing the earth like it was foreign. He didn't follow Darius to the door. Instead, he walked to the side of the porch and lay down, facing the woods. That night, Darius sat alone on the couch, lights off, a single beer warming in his hand. He left the front door cracked open. Tyson never came inside. At 2:47 a.m., he heard it, the soft pad of paws, not coming in but settling just outside the door. A quiet vigil, the kind only war dogs knew how to keep. Darius didn't move, didn't speak, just closed his eyes, his throat aching from unshed words. It wasn't recognition, not yet, but it was something. The next morning, the sun had barely begun to stretch its arms over the horizon when Darius stepped out onto the porch, mug of bitter black coffee in hand, and found Tyson still lying in the same spot as last night, rigid, alert, distant. The dog hadn't moved all night, hadn't whimpered, hadn't scratched at the door. It was like he existed in a separate world entirely. His body here, but his spirit locked somewhere far away, unreachable. Darius sat on the top step, keeping a respectful distance, not saying a word, letting the silence between them speak the volumes neither of them could yet. When he tried to approach slowly, calmly, hands visible, Tyson's ears pinned back, and a low, guttural growl rumbled from his chest. It wasn't the sound of a dog ready to attack. It was deeper, haunted. Darius froze mid-step, the pain tightening in his gut. This wasn't fear or aggression, it was trauma surfacing through muscle memory. He knew that sound. He'd heard it in foxholes under collapsing roofs, in the seconds before everything went black. And now it was aimed at him. From Tyson, from his own partner. The volunteer who had helped with the transfer pulled her jacket tighter and gave Darius a cautious glance. "Honestly, sir," she said gently, "I don't think this is going to work out. He's been through something, whatever it was. It's like his whole system is fried. If you push too hard, he might snap." Her voice wasn't cold, just tired. She'd seen too many failed adoptions, too many animals with broken brains and invisible scars. "You have protocols. We're not supposed to let dogs this reactive go without full behavioral clearance." Darius nodded once, not taking his eyes off Tyson. "You said he doesn't bite. I'm not scared of a growl." "That's not the point," she said, softer now. "Sometimes it's not about whether you're scared of him, it's whether he's scared of you." But Darius didn't answer, because deep down he knew the truth. Tyson wasn't scared of him. Tyson was scared of what Darius reminded him of. The dust, the noise, the heat, the blood, the smell of burning nylon, the smell of fear, and most of all, the uniformed figure that had once stood between life and death, now standing here, bringing it all back like a ghost refusing to fade. That evening, Darius left the door open again, placed a bowl of food just inside, and sat on the porch as twilight spread across the sky like a bruise. Tyson eventually got up and paced near the edge, circling the house twice, never stepping past the threshold. Around 10 p.m., Darius turned out the lights and went to bed, leaving the bowl untouched. It was nearly 1 a.m. when he heard the faint shuffle of paws, the dry click of nails on wood. He didn't get up. He just listened. But when morning came, the food was still there. Tyson was gone. The gate was unlatched. Darius's breath caught in his throat as he stepped outside, scanning the yard. The leash still hung by the door, untouched. He called softly, "Tyson, boy?" But no answer came. No bark, no jingle of collar, not even rustling from the trees. Panic didn't come like a rush, it came slow and cold, like ice moving through his spine. He threw on his jacket, grabbed his keys and started driving. He checked the woods first, then the abandoned farm down the hill, then the dirt road that ran behind the old mill where kids used to sneak off to smoke. Nothing. Each place brought back a fragment, a memory buried under years of silence. The places he and Tyson had once walked together during leave, during training, during recovery. Each place a dead end. Until he reached a clearing just beyond the city line. It wasn't on any official map anymore. Most locals had forgotten about it. But Darius knew it well. It was the training ground they'd used for covert canine retrieval exercises years ago, before everything went sideways. The terrain had barely changed. Red earth, scorched in places, patches of stubborn weeds clawing their way through stone. There, near a cluster of broken sandbags and a rotting perimeter fence, sat Tyson still. Watching the horizon, Darius cut the engine and stepped out slowly, quietly, almost reverently. He didn't call out, just walked toward the dog with steady steps. Tyson didn't flinch, didn't growl, didn't move. His body was tense, ears forward, eyes scanning as if expecting a drone to buzz overhead or a mortar shell to scream down. And then Darius understood. This wasn't just some random place Tyson had wandered into. This was the site of their last real mission together, the one that ended with Darius buried under rubble, and Tyson dragging him out by the sleeve of his torn combat vest. The one where the unit lost 3 men. The one neither of them ever spoke about. The one that changed everything. Tyson had come here not by accident. He had remembered. His instincts had carried him back to the last place that made any sense. The last place where his training had purpose, where his loyalty had direction, where his mission was clear. Darius knelt down slowly a few feet behind him. "Ty," he said softly, "you're not lost, you're just..." Minutes passed. Then an hour. The sun rose, dull and indifferent. Still, neither of them moved. And then, Tyson shifted. He stood up slowly, turned his head halfway and looked at Darius. Not all the way, not fully, but enough for the breath to catch again in Darius's throat. Enough for the memory to flicker just once in both their eyes. And then, the morning after Tyson returned from the clearing, Darius didn't speak a word. He just opened the front door, left a second bowl of food on the porch beside the first, and sat quietly on the steps with a thermos of coffee clutched in his scarred hands. Tyson didn't come right away, but around noon, as the sun crept high and the day warmed, he appeared like a shadow edging its way back into the light. Cautious, watchful, but present. He didn't come for Darius. He came because something inside him hadn't let go of the past. Not entirely. That night, Tyson stayed on the porch. The next day, Darius found himself digging through a locked metal case in the back of his closet. A box he hadn't touched in years. Inside were documents, IDs, faded photographs, and a manila envelope stamped with an old army seal. Among the files was one labeled K9 Unit Transfer Records, Return to Dactic. He flipped it open and found a partial trail of what had happened to Tyson after the explosion, his transfer medical scans, notes from a private contractor labeled Reintegration Training Program, and a clinical summary marked with thick red letters, Behavioral Adjustment Therapy Administered. Darius's stomach dropped. MK9 was a chemical compound developed in deep black projects for high-anxiety animals. The side effects were notorious: memory dampening, emotional numbing, and, in some cases, permanent detachment from prior handlers. Most units had banned it, but private companies didn't play by military rules. Tyson had been experimented on, weaponized and erased. The rage that welled up in Darius's, it was slow and heavy, like hot tar coating his insides. Someone had taken his dog and his partner and turned him into a blank slate, scrubbed his memories clean in the name of compliance. No wonder Tyson didn't recognize him. No wonder his eyes looked like glass. Later that evening, while cleaning Tyson's fur after a walk, one of the few moments where the dog tolerated limited touch, Darius noticed the twitch, a small, almost imperceptible jerk every time his fingers brushed behind Tyson's left ear. He leaned closer, gently parting the fur, and saw the pink, puckered line of scar tissue trailing toward the base of the skull. The vet had missed it, or hadn't mentioned it, a faint burn mark, possibly from a neural tag or worse, shock therapy. Darius pulled back and sat in silence for a long time, Tyson's body warm against his leg, unmoving. The wind outside rattled the screen door, and the cicadas began their shrill evening chorus. In his chest, something cracked. He remembered the blast, the pressure wave that tore through their convoy during an ambush. The scream of metal, the dead silence that followed, more terrifying than the explosion itself. He'd been thrown 6 feet, shattered his shoulder, torn open his side, but he'd survived because Tyson had lunged, shielding him in the instant before the detonation. That shield had cost Tyson part of his hearing. The next day, Darius conducted a quiet test. He stood in the kitchen while Tyson lay in the hallway, relaxed but alert. He clapped his hands once behind the dog's right side. Tyson's head snapped toward the sound instantly. Then he repeated the motion on the left side this time. Nothing. No flicker, no response. He tried again. Louder. Still nothing. Darius leaned against the counter and closed his eyes. The same side where the burn scar lay. The same side Tyson had pressed against Darius when he took the blast. It wasn't just his mind that had been damaged. It was his body too. The very sensors that had once made him such a precise, reactive partner. Darius pulled up the hem of his own shirt and traced the jagged scar running along his ribs. Same side, same day, same wound. They were twin ghosts, walking parallel tracks through the same broken timeline. That night, as a storm rolled in and rain began tapping against the tin roof, Darius sat beside Tyson on the floor, old blankets spread out for warmth. He didn't say much, just laid the worn army vest between them, the one Tyson used to wear during missions, the one they'd both bled on. He placed it gently, letting the scent of dust and cordite linger in the room, like incense. Tyson sniffed it, didn't react. Then, slowly, cautiously, he placed one paw on the fabric. For the first time, he didn't pull away. The next morning, Darius called a former army contact, an old medic named Sloan, who now worked in vet behavioral therapy. They hadn't spoken in years, not since the discharge. Darius explained Tyson's case, recited every symptom, every reaction. The MK9 note, the scar behind the ear. Sloan went quiet, then said, "They used him. You know, you can't reverse MK9. Not completely. But sometimes the mind finds another way back." What does that mean? It means you don't try to force him to remember who he was. You help him become something new, with the parts that survived. Darius stared out the window at Tyson lying on the back porch, head resting on his paws, watching a squirrel dig beneath the old oak tree. For the first time in weeks, the tension in the dog's body seemed. Darius tossed a small piece onto the floor. Tyson watched it fall, sniffed, then walked over and ate it. Not out of hunger, out of trust. Later, after the dishes were washed and the lights dimmed, Darius reached into the drawer beside his bed and took out a photograph. It was worn at the edges, creased down the middle. In it, he was kneeling in a desert camp, arms slung around Tyson's neck, both of them squinting at the sun. Behind them, the ruins of a mission site cast long shadows. He placed the photo near Tyson's bed, didn't say a word, just waited. Tyson stared at it for a long time, then turned his back to it. But he didn't walk away. Later that week, the wind brought in a shift in the air, an early autumn storm rolling in from the west, thick clouds swallowing the sun and turning the sky to iron. Darius stood in the middle of his small living room, the floor covered with scattered memorabilia he hadn't touched in years. Medals, faded documents, maps, and a portable hard drive labeled K9OPS. His fingers hovered over the power button of an old laptop before pressing it down, the screen flickering to life with a quiet hum. He hadn't meant to dig into the past, but something in the way Tyson looked at the vest the other night, still cautious, still restrained, yet unwilling to leave it, had stirred a restlessness inside him that wouldn't settle. He scrolled through folders filled with archived mission footage. Names he hadn't spoken aloud in years flashed across the screen. Most were gone. A few were ghosts. Then he found Camp Bastion, Final Op Recovery. The video was short, just under 90 seconds. The screen lit up with the harsh grain of field camera footage. Darius, younger, leaner, with a fresh wound on his cheek, sat propped against a sandbag wall, dirt-streaked and blood-crusted. Tyson, tail wagging, licked at the dried blood on his face, whining softly as medics buzzed around in the background. "I'm fine, boy," Darius's voice in the clip murmured, exhausted but smiling. "It's just a scratch, you took worse." He turned the volume up. That voice, his own from the past, filled the small living room like a whisper across dimensions. Tyson, lying near the door, lifted his head. He stared at the screen. The tail didn't wag. He didn't move, but his body grew rigid, and then Darius saw it. A tremble so slight it could have been missed. Tyson's chest shuddered once, then again, his paws twitching like he was struggling to stay grounded. Darius didn't speak. He didn't call his name, he just kept the video playing, watching Tyson's ears twitch and his breathing quicken with every word. When the video ended, Darius turned off the screen and looked at his partner. "Do you remember that?" he asked softly. Tyson blinked, then turned away slowly, deliberately, as if hiding from something not on the screen but inside himself. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Darius didn't press him. That night, the rain came hard. It started just after midnight, the kind of thunderstorm that turned roads to rivers and cracked trees in half. Lightning lit up the house in flashes, and thunder growled like distant artillery. Darius had just pulled the blanket over his shoulders when he heard the floor creak. At first he thought it was the wind, but then he felt it, a warm weight pressing against the side of the bed. He turned his head and saw Tyson standing there, shaking. His black and tan coat was soaked from the humidity near the windows, his eyes wide and glassy, his breath shallow and fast. Darius reached out, slow and fast. Darius reached out, slow and fast. Darius. Then the thunder cracked again, louder this time. So sudden it rattled the window panes. In a flash of movement, Tyson jumped, not with aggression, with desperation. He launched himself up onto the bed and curled into a tight ball against Darius's chest, burying his nose beneath the blanket, his body shaking with a tremor that went straight to the bone. Darius's heart slammed in his chest. It wasn't the first time he'd felt a body pressed against his during a storm, but this time, it wasn't a fellow soldier. It was the same dog that used to lay with him in a dugout bunker outside Jalalabad, both of them shivering not from cold, but from the weight of waiting for the mortar strike to end, for the sun to rise, for the order to move again. Without thinking, Darius wrapped his arm around Tyson's side. The dog didn't move, didn't growl, didn't pull away. For the first time since the shelter, his breathing began to slow. Still rapid, still panicked, but no longer spiraling. Darius could feel each heartbeat against his ribs, each tremble fading like the rain outside as it began to soften to a steady rhythm. His other hand found the back of Tyson's neck, gently stroking between the scarred fur, not forcing contact. "He's okay," he whispered, the words barely audible beneath the storm. "We're not there anymore." Tyson didn't respond, but he didn't leave either. The room was dark except for the intermittent flashes of lightning and the occasional rumble of thunder, now distant. Darius kept his hand where it was, fingers steady, eyes closed, remembering the rhythm of field life, how even in chaos routine could be salvation. And maybe, just maybe, this night was a crack in the door, not open, but not sealed shut. When dawn broke, pale and foggy, the storm had passed. The bed was empty. Darius sat up, his back sore, the blanket half off the mattress. Tyson was on the floor, curled up by the foot of the bed. His head rested on the worn army vest, and this time his eyes were closed, not in fear, but in sleep. The morning was cold and sharp, the kind that made breath cloud in the air and bones creak from old injuries. Darius stepped out onto the porch with a blanket draped over one shoulder and saw Tyson already awake, sitting at the edge of the yard near the fence, staring at the tree line. He didn't move when Darius approached. He didn't growl, but his stillness wasn't peace, it was tension, the kind wired into muscle memory and fear. And Darius was beginning to realize that whatever was broken inside Tyson wasn't physical anymore. It was buried somewhere deeper, somewhere that couldn't be reached with food or patience alone. That's when he called Dr. Jenna Salas. She had been a military veterinarian, worked 3 tours embedded with special operations, and now consulted on high-trauma canine behavior back stateside. They hadn't spoken in years, not since Darius's final deployment. When she picked up, her voice cracked with surprise and exhaustion. "Darius, I thought you were living off GIDS somewhere." "I was," he replied. "I guess I'm trying not to anymore." She arrived the next afternoon in a dented blue SUV, dark hair in a bun, eyes sharp behind rectangular glasses. Tyson didn't bark when she got out. He just watched, observed. Darius met her halfway down the gravel path. "You didn't tell me it was him," she said softly, eyes drifting toward the dog. "I wasn't sure until I saw the scar behind his ear." Darius murmured. The file says they used MK9. Jenna's jaw tightened. Figures. They didn't talk much as she approached Tyson. She didn't reach for him. She just crouched 10 feet away and opened a notepad, talking in low tones not to him but near him, letting her presence feel non-threatening. Tyson stared at her, unblinking. After 10 minutes, she stood, dusted off her knees, and walked back toward the porch where Darius waited. "He's not detached," she said simply. "He's hyper-aware, watchful, and terrified." Darius looked down. "So he's not broken." "But he's broken," Jenna said with a small exhale. "But not in the way people think. He didn't forget you. He's afraid of what happens if he does remember. Some animals develop block trauma responses if they connect too many dots too fast. It overwhelms the nervous system, shuts them down. That's what the MK9 was designed for. But in his case," she looked over her shoulder, "he's fighting the instinct to come back to you." Darius blinked, absorbing it like a gut punch that somehow hurt less than guilt. "So what do I do?" "You don't push," she said. "You wait. You give him tools. Triggers that belong to you. Not the ones they fed him in training, not the noise you..." That night, long after Jenna had gone, Darius sat in his garage for the first time in months, going through his old rucksack. Dust flew from the fold. He pulled out the worn combat vest, still heavy with dried earth and frayed Velcro. In the side pocket, his fingers found it, the whistle, dull metal, cold against his skin. It hadn't been used in years. Back then, the pattern of 2 sharp blows meant return, meant safety, meant home. He hesitated for a moment, thumb brushing the edge of the mouthpiece. Tyson lay near the back door, curled in the same corner he always claimed. Darius stepped outside, pulled on the vest, felt the weight settle on his shoulders like memory, and raised the whistle to his lips. 2 sharp bursts. The sound split the air, cutting through the silence like a scalpel. Tyson's head snapped up instantly. His ears perked, his eyes fixed on Darius, but his body didn't move. He didn't growl, didn't flinch, but he didn't come. Darius stood still, holding his breath, refusing to say a word. Seconds passed. Tyson stood slowly, cautiously, as if testing the ground beneath his feet. He took 1 step forward, stopped, then another, then nothing. He stayed there, 20 feet away, myself. He was thinking, he was choosing. Darius didn't move. He lowered the whistle and let it hang around his neck. "I'm still here," he said softly. "Same damn fool in this vest, same voice, same hand." Tyson tilted his head slightly, and then, for the first time, he sat down. Right where he stood, not running, not hiding, just staying. Darius felt something shift, not in the air, but deep in the soil beneath him, like a fault line cracking just enough to let the first drop of water seep through. It wasn't trust yet, but it was no longer fear. That night, Darius didn't sleep. He sat by the back door with the whistle in his hand and the vest draped over the arm of the chair, watching Tyson through the screen as the dog lay on the porch, eyes half closed, body still but not tense. At 3:04 a.m., a branch cracked in the distance. Tyson stood immediately, eyes alert, body ready. He didn't bark. He turned, looked at Darius through the screen door, and didn't blink. The leaves had begun to fall in earnest, scattering across the front yard like rusted memories blown loose by October wind. Darius had started to notice small patterns at first. Tyson no longer flinched when he stepped too close, no longer growled at the rattle of the back gate. But some days the stillness felt too still, like silence with teeth, waiting for something unsaid. That feeling clawed at Darius's chest on Tuesday afternoon, when he heard shouting near the road. He stepped out onto the porch just in time to see Tyson launch. It happened in seconds, a blur of muscle and rage tearing across the gravel path, toward a figure near the mailbox. Darius sprinted down the steps, heart slamming, calling Tyson's name, his boots skidding in the dirt. By the time he reached them, Tyson had pinned the man to the ground, teeth bared inches from the stranger's throat, body rigid with pure instinct. "Tyson, off!" Darius barked, voice sharp. The dog froze, shook once, and pulled back, breath ragged, chest heaving. The man lay stunned, eyes wide, mouth bloodied from where he'd hit the gravel. Darius dropped to one knee. "You all right?" he asked, helping the man sit up. "Jesus," the man wheezed, hands trembling. "It's him, that dog. I trained that damn mutt years ago. private job out in Fallon, Darius felt the temperature in his veins drop like ice water. "What did you say?" The man looked at Tyson, now standing still but vibrating with tension. "He was mine before we sold him. Part of that behavioral override gig, shock collars, flood drills, dominance. Breaks? Mean son of a bitch back then." The rage hit Darius like shrapnel. "You used electric on him." The man coughed. "Wasn't my call, orders from higher up. But yeah, we broke him hard. They wanted machines, not mutts." Darius stood, fists clenched so tight his knuckles cracked. "You broke nothing. He survived you." Without another word, he walked Tyson back toward the house, the dog's body still stiff, like he was holding back something ancient and hot. Darius didn't say anything for the rest of the day. He didn't have to. Tyson lay by the front door that night, eyes never leaving the darkness beyond the porch. That was the night the pattern began. At exactly 2:03 a.m., Darius stirred awake to the sound of claws ticking softly across the hardwood. He turned in bed and saw Tyson standing by the window, ears forward, back straight, silent. The next night, it happened again, 2:03 on the dot. Tyson rose from sleep and stood sentry. No barking, no pacing, just listening. By the fifth night, Darius stopped pretending it was coincidence. He stayed awake, watching. Tyson would rise, stretch once, then walk to the corner of the room where the wall met the window, sit down, and stare. For hours. It was the same behavior Darius remembered from Kandahar. During those 4 hours every night, when mortar fire rained outside their boomki, they had to sit in total silence, waiting, praying, listening for anything to move. For 4 nights straight, neither man nor dog had made a sound. They had communicated only with breath, with presence. Tyson was reliving that. Every night. Exactly 2:03. Time. The timeline. Pulled the old mission logs from his hard drive. Cross-verified the timestamp. Confirmed. The first blast had struck the outer wall of their compound at 2:03 hours. The next 4 hours had been an endless crawl of smoke, dirt, and whispers. No light, no words. And Tyson remembered. Not in a way that brought him One morning, after another sleepless night, Darius sat on the porch while Tyson laid nearby, his head resting on the wood slats. He reached into the pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out a crumpled photo taken by another soldier just before that mission. In the image, Tyson sat beside him, alert, eyes sharp. Darius's face was younger but tired in a way that had nothing to do with years. He set the photo on the porch between them. Tyson lifted his head, stared, didn't approach, but didn't look away. Darius watched him quietly, the memory playing out behind his eyes, the ghost of sand still in his teeth. Later that week, he tried something new. He left a flashlight on the floor beside Tyson's bed and clicked it on at exactly 2:03 a.m. Tyson didn't move, but his ears turned. The light flickered once, then went still, and somehow, so did Tyson. The cold in the air had grown sharper, clinging to the windows like frost before sunrise. And Darius found himself spending more mornings watching his breath fog in front of him while Tyson lay still in the hallway. The nights were quieter now. Tyson still rose at 2:03 a.m., but the tension in his body seemed to ebb earlier, and Darius no longer felt the weight of war bleeding through the walls. Still, he knew something hung unspoken between them, a space neither dared cross, a waiting. On Thursday, Darius opened the old wooden trunk at the foot of his bed, the one with broken hinges and faded stencils from his deployment, and reached for a battered object tucked beneath a folded uniform. It was the training ball, thick rubber, dirt-stained, teeth marks indented in its surface like the grooves of a shared language long forgotten. Tyson used to carry it like a badge of pride, never letting it out of reach after missions. It had once been a symbol of joy, of reward, of play earned through survival. Now, it felt like a test. Darius walked out to the back porch and placed the ball carefully in the center of the worn wooden floorboards, just between his chair and the threshold of the yard where Tyson often lingered in silence. Then he stepped back, sitting slowly, hands on his knees, not speaking a word. Cautious, deliberate as always. He saw the ball almost immediately. His eyes didn't widen. He didn't sniff or paw at it. Instead, he walked to it, paused, and then lay down beside it. Not like a dog at rest, but like a soldier guarding something sacred. He rested his head against the ball, not moving, not blinking. Darius's throat tightened. It was as if Tyson remembered, but only through muscle, through scent, through the weight of old routines. Not a full memory, not yet, but the imprint of one, like a boot print in ash. For nearly an hour, Tyson lay there, guarding the ball like it still carried orders. Darius didn't disturb him. He just watched, knowing this was a step that couldn't be forced, only witnessed. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Darius stood on the porch again, mug of black coffee steaming in the chill. Tyson was nearby, tail still, eyes alert. The wind was light, carrying the scent of pine and soil. Nothing stirred for long minutes. Then, slowly, Tyson rose. Without command, without encouragement. He walked toward Darius, each step careful, measured, like walking through a minefield of memories he wasn't sure he wanted to cross. He stopped a few inches away and lifted his head. Then, with an almost hesitant gesture, he pressed his nose against Darius's open hand. The contact was brief, soft, unsure, searching, a sniff, a pause, and then he pulled away, turning his back and walking toward the edge of the porch once more. But Darius didn't move, didn't call after him. He just closed his hand around the invisible warmth left behind, heart pounding not from fear, but from a fragile hope that hurt more than despair. Tyson had reached out, of his own will, not because of a command, not because of a memory, because something inside him was testing the waters of recognition. It wasn't affection, it wasn't surrender, but it was curiosity, and that, for Darius, was more sacred than loyalty. It meant the door wasn't locked anymore. Just closed, not sealed. That same afternoon, Darius found Tyson in the backyard, lying beneath the old oak tree, the ball resting against his front paws again. His eyes were open but soft, his breath calm. The world around him no longer seemed like a threat, just a presence he was slowly starting to accept. As Darius approached, Tyson didn't move, didn't react, just let him sit. A full minute passed before Tyson shifted slightly and let out a breath, almost a sigh. It was the first sound Darius had heard from him that wasn't born of fear. It was, somehow, heavier than any bark, and somehow lighter. As the evening fell, the last rays of light filtered through the trees, casting long golden lines across the grass, and Darius leaned back against the trunk near Tyson, the silence between them no longer empty but full of something unnamed. The week moved like fog across familiar ground, slow and heavy but no longer paralyzed. Tyson had begun spending more time inside the house, no longer pausing at the doorway like it was enemy territory, no longer flinching at every shift in the floorboards. He didn't seek out Darius, not directly, but he didn't avoid him either. There were moments now, fleeting, tentative, where their proximity didn't feel like a standoff, but like something approaching memory. One such morning, as the wind whispered through the cracked open kitchen window, Darius found himself reaching for something old, something unused for years but deeply encoded. It was a word, a language, Swahili, used in covert ops, short and precise, designed for clarity under stress. Darius hadn't spoken it aloud since Afghanistan, and Tyson, he had once known every syllable like instinct. Standing in the center of the living room, Darius took a breath, let it fill him with stillness, and said gently, "Ketty." Tyson looked up from where he lay curled near the heater, his head tilted slightly, just a flicker of confusion, or maybe recollection. Then slowly, as if his bones resisted it, Tyson sat. It wasn't robotic, it wasn't obedience, it was familiar, like his body recognized the shape of the word, even if his mind couldn't place it. But the moment passed quickly. As soon as he completed the motion, Tyson's ears went back and he lowered his head, stepping away like he'd touched something hot. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, he just retreated to the far end of the hallway, lay down in the shadows and closed his eyes tight. Darius watched him, heart thudding with a strange mix of triumph and grief. The command had worked, but it had cost something. Tyson looked exhausted, like the act of remembering, even through muscle memory, had drug him through a tunnel of pain he wasn't ready to re-enter. Darius didn't follow him. He let the silence settle like dust, unspoken and sacred. Later that night, unable to sleep, Darius found himself searching the old footlocker again, not for weapons or medals or gear, but for something smaller, something personal. He dug through layers of folded fatigues, packets of field rations, and at the very bottom, tucked into the inner pocket of his old tactical vest, his fingers brushed a square of stiff paper, faded from heat, edges frayed. He pulled it into the dim light. In the image, Tyson stood in a muddy forward operating base, his fur matted, his body splattered with dirt, but his eyes sharp, burning with vigilance. He stood beside a still form, draped in a tarp. A fallen soldier, Private Ryan Huxley, the youngest member of their unit, killed during a raid that went south. But Tyson had stood there, refusing to leave the body. For 6 hours, eyes locked on the horizon, daring anything else to try. Darius sat back, the photo trembling slightly in his hand. He remembered now how they'd tried to pull Tyson away, how he had resisted every command, how he'd stayed planted like a statue carved from grief. No one spoke of it afterward. Some grief was too sacred to name. He turned the photo over. On the back, in his own faded handwriting, he stayed, even when no one else could. The words blurred for a moment as Darius blinked against the sting. Tyson was lying nearby now, head tucked between his paws, the lines of his body softened by sleep. Darius didn't show him the photo. Not yet. Not until it wouldn't hurt to remember. The quiet between them had grown softer, less like a wall and more like a space they were learning to share. And by the time Darius clipped the leash to Tyson's collar that afternoon, it wasn't a command. It was an invitation. The park was almost empty when they arrived, the sun beginning its slow descent across the Arizona sky, casting long, tired shadows over the field where the grass had started turning brittle with the season's change. Tyson walked beside him, not behind, not dragging his weight but with a measured pace, his steps syncing loosely with Darius's like a rhythm they used to know by heart. Darius carried the rubber training ball in his jacket pocket. Though he hadn't planned on using it, there had been so many small steps lately, looks held too long, a paw left resting on his boot. The way Tyson now slept with his back turned, but never more than a few feet away, and he didn't want to break the quiet magic forming between them by asking for too much too soon. Still, when they reached the far edge of the field where trees curled low and the wind spoke in dry rustle, Darius pulled the ball from his pocket. He didn't look at Tyson. He didn't speak. He simply drew his arm back and tossed the ball gently across the grass, watching it tumble through gold-tinged dust until it came to rest near a clump of dandelions. Tyson's head turned sharply, ears pricked, but he did not right away. Darius stayed still, hands in his pockets, not expecting anything. He had long since let go of hope where this ball was concerned. But Tyson stood. One step, then another, a pause, and then, in a smooth, quiet run, he moved. His legs stretched into motion, his chest low to the ground, eyes locked on the ball, not like prey but like memory. He reached it and stopped, nose touching rubber, his body still. Then, slowly, he picked it up. He didn't chew, didn't wag his tail. He simply turned and walked back straight, unwavering. When he arrived, he didn't drop the ball into Darius's hand. He didn't release it at all. He just stood there, eyes meeting Darius's, the ball held firmly in his mouth, as if to say, "I remember this. I don't know why, but I do." They stood in silence for a long moment, the sun warming both their faces, the wind curling gently through the dying grass. Then Tyson turned, lay down on the earth beside Darius's feet, and set the ball between his paws. He rested his head beside it and closed his eyes. That night, the house was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the occasional creak of settling floorboards. Darius couldn't sleep, not really. His body lay still under the blanket, but his mind buzzed with a low current of memory and noise, half thoughts of war, of voices long silenced, of doors he didn't remember closing. Tyson was lying just outside the bedroom, near the open doorway, his breathing steady, slow. Darius turned on his side, reaching for sleep, but it came jagged and sharp, folding in on itself until suddenly he was back, the dust, the blood, the ringing in his ears. He was pinned under something heavy, breath caught in his throat, unable to scream. A door slammed, a gun fired, and yet he gasped, sat up, chest heaving, eyes wild. The room was dark but familiar, and yet for a few seconds it felt like the past had swallowed him whole. Then he felt it. A weight, gentle but firm, pressing softly against his chest. He looked down and saw Tyson, half on the bed, two front paws planted, head resting lightly against Darius's sternum. He wasn't barking, he wasn't panicked. He was simply there, holding him in place, holding him here. Just like he had in the bunker, that night when Darius had nearly blacked out from blood loss and the world was collapsing around them. Tyson had laid across his chest then too, anchoring him to the floor, to the moment, to breath. Darius didn't speak, he didn't cry, he just laid a hand on Tyson's neck, feeling the steady pulse beneath the fur. Tyson didn't move. He kept his head there for a long time, eyes half closed, as if listening to Darius's heartbeat was enough to know he was safely. Outside, the wind picked up, the trees whispered, but inside there was nothing except that weight on his chest, the warmth of an old body remembering its purpose, and the breath they now shared in the dark. The morning broke soft and golden, stretching light across the wet grass and faded porch like forgiveness. Darius stood in the doorway, the warmth of a fresh mug of coffee between his hands, but his eyes were fixed on the figure lying in the backyard. Tyson, still curled under the old oak tree, one paw resting against the dirt-smeared ball they'd shared like a secret the day before. Something had changed. Not a breakthrough that could be defined or measured, but a shift in the air between them, an unspoken agreement neither had signed but both had begun to honor. Darius reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out the old whistle, its cold metal humming slightly against his fingers. He hadn't used it since the last time Tyson approached without finishing the gesture, as if remembering too much would break him in half. But today felt different. Darius lifted it to his lips, hesitated just long enough for the silence to tighten around them, and blew. Two short bursts. Crisp, clean, the whistle cut through the stillness like the sound of boots on a battlefield, like the voice of a ghost asking to come home. Tyson stirred immediately. His ears twitched. His head shot. His body didn't freeze. It moved. First a trot, then a sprint. Across the grass, paws kicking up tiny clouds of morning dew. And when he reached Darius, he didn't stop short or wait for instruction. He sat, right where he used to, just to the left, shoulder to knee, facing forward. His tail wagged once, slow but sure. And when he looked up, there was no fear in his eyes. No hesitation. Only breath, memory. Belonging. Darius didn't speak. He lowered the whistle, blinked once against the weight in his throat, and dropped his hand to Tyson's back, resting there as if that one connection could hold the world together. Later that day, they returned to Willow Park. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't press against the chest but settled into it. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows over the field, stretching the trees into dark silhouettes against a burnished sky. Darius and Tyson walked side by side. No leash, no commands, just a rhythm their bodies remembered better than their minds. At the far end of the park, beneath the cypress tree, Darius sat down on their usual bench. Tyson lay beside him, his breathing steady, his presence no longer cautious but calm. He rested his head gently on Darius's boot, not out of duty but comfort. And for the first time in years, Darius felt something open in his chest, a door that had rusted shut from grief, guilt, and time. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch, its edges frayed from years of neglect. Inside was the silver star, the medal no one ever saw, the one he'd never displayed. He turned it once in his fingers, then bent down and clipped it gently to the loop on Tyson's collar, where tags should have hung but never did. The metal caught the last rays of sunlight, flashing for a second like firelight. "You don't need to remember, Tyson," Darius said softly, fingers brushing the fur just above the metal. "You never stopped being my soldier." Tyson lifted his head slowly, looked at Darius, and then, in one quiet motion, licked the back of his hand and laid his head across his thigh. His eyes shimmered, but he didn't turn away. He didn't look past him, he looked at him, as if to say, "I never left. I was just trying to find my way back." Darius didn't cry, not fully, but his shoulders dropped, and the ache in his spine loosened like something long clenched had finally let go. The wind rustled the trees around them. Distant laughter from a child reached across the park like a memory being rewritten. And in that silence, neither man nor dog said a word. They didn't have to. What was lost had been found, not in the body, not in the command, but in something deeper. Something earned. On that bench, beneath a sky painted in gold and blood orange, With a war dog's head resting on his leg and a medal catching the final flicker of daylight, Darius finally understood. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to carry it together, quietly, side by side. If this story touched you, consider giving it a like and subscribing so you don't miss the next one. What part of the story stayed with you the most? Was it the first time Tyson reacted to the whistle, or when he laid his head on Darius's chest during that nightmare? Also, let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you.